At 73 years old, I stood under the chandeliers of the St. Regis Ballroom in Houston, holding a neatly wrapped gift with my son's name on it. The crowd buzzed with the kind of laughter that comes easy when people think they're on the winning side of life. Then my son lifted his champagne glass and said clear enough for everyone to hear, "That's my mom's ex-husband over there. My real dad is standing right here." He pointed at Vincent Hale, my ex-wife's new husband, a man 20 years younger with slicked back hair and a Rolex the size of a biscuit. The room went still. Forks hovered mid-air. Someone chuckled nervously like laughter could fix the cruelty of that moment. I just smiled. Have you ever been erased by your own child, not hated, not forgotten, just rewritten? My name is Thomas Greer, 73 years old, born and raised in Texas. I spent 4 decades building other people's dream homes, marble foyers, imported granite swimming pools that shimmered like glass. I worked my way up from a man with a toolbox in his truck to owning Greer Construction Group, one of the largest contracting firms in the state. But here's what they don't tell you about success. It doesn't guarantee respect, especially from the people you love. My ex-wife Claudia stood beside Vincent that night, dripping in diamonds I probably paid for one way or another. She had that polite society smile, the one that says we're civilized people even while watching someone bleed on the inside. And my son Ryan, now 36, stood there basking in Vincent's glow, like a man finally getting the father he deserved. I could have said something. God knows I had the words. But after 73 years, you learn that silence can be louder than a fist through glass. I crossed the room, handed Ryan the gift, an antique watch I'd restored myself, the same one my father gave me when I graduated college. "Happy birthday, son," I said. He didn't open it, didn't even look me in the eye. Instead, he turned to Vincent and said, "Thanks again for the Tesla, Dad. You really came through." Laughter rippled through the guests. That word "dad" landed harder than any insult I'd ever heard. I could feel Grace, my daughter, stiffen beside me. She whispered, "Dad, please just ignore him. He's trying to get a reaction." "I'm not mad," I said softly. "He just gave me the best gift I could have asked for." She frowned. What gift? Clarity. Across the room, Ryan lifted his glass again, all charm and arrogance. "Vincent's teaching me what real men do," he said. And just like that, I realized I'd spent 35 years teaching my son to be dependent, and another 5 teaching him how to insult me. I watched him raise that glass, and something inside me settled. A kind of quiet that only comes when a man decides he's done apologizing for existing. I turned to leave. Behind me, someone started singing "Happy Birthday." The sound blurred into static as I stepped outside into the cool Houston night. The valet handed me my keys. My old Ford pickup looked out of place among all those imported cars, but somehow it felt more honest. As I pulled away, I saw the glow of the ballroom fading in my rearview mirror along with the last piece of patience I had left. Because that night, Ryan didn't just humiliate me, he freed me. Before we continue, tell me something. Where are you listening from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's see how far this story reaches. When I got home that night, Houston's skyline glowed behind me like a city that didn't care who'd just had his heart broken. I set the wrapped watch box on my kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of bourbon. The sound of the ice hitting the crystal was the only applause I got for 35 years of fatherhood. That smile I wore at the party, the one that fooled them all, was still frozen on my face. It wasn't pride, and it wasn't strength. It was armor. I sat there in the dim light surrounded by framed photos that suddenly felt like witnesses instead of memories. There was Ryan at 10 holding his first fishing rod. Ryan at 17 behind the wheel of his first truck, the one I'd rebuilt by hand. And Ryan at 22 wearing a cap and gown I'd worked overtime to pay for. Every picture had one thing in common: I was always standing behind him, never beside him. Always pushing, always funding, always invisible. That's the thing about being a provider. People mistake your sacrifices for your duties. My ex-wife Claudia used to say, "Thomas, money isn't everything." And she was right, money wasn't everything. It was just everything they wanted from me. At 73, I should have been sitting on a beach somewhere, not sitting in a quiet house replaying my own son's words, like a courtroom testimony. I used to believe that if I just kept giving, they'd finally see how much I loved them. But love without limits isn't love. It's slavery with good intentions. I walked down the hallway to my study. The shelves were lined with contracts, plaques, and blueprints. The kind of things that tell the world you've succeeded until your own child tells you you're nobody. On my desk sat a dusty envelope, the Greer Family Trust, the account I'd set up for Ryan when he was 25. He was supposed to use it for business ventures, something to build a future with. Instead, he'd spent it chasing luxury like it was oxygen designer watches, failed investments, impulsive trips to Aspen. I opened the file, ran my fingers along the edge, and felt that same cold clarity I'd felt leaving the ballroom. Every man reaches a point when he realizes his kindness has become someone else's currency. And that night, I decided to stop the trade. I took out my phone and typed a note: "Tomorrow Horizon Private Bank, 9:30 a.m. Remove Ryan Greer from account access. Effective immediately." I stared at the words until they stopped trembling. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock each second, reminding me how long I'd let guilt manage my generosity. When my late wife Margaret was still alive, she used to tell me, "Thomas, don't confuse giving with fixing. One's love, the other's control." I didn't understand it then. But sitting there watching the city lights flicker through the blinds, I finally did. For years I'd tried to fix Ryan's failures with money, thinking I was helping him become strong. But all I'd done was weaken him. He never had to stand on his own 2 feet because mine were always holding him up. I closed the file, and turned off the desk lamp. The bourbon glass was empty now, but the ache had settled into something steadier resolve. At 73, I didn't have many wars left in me. But this one, the quiet kind, the kind fought with decisions instead of words, that one I could still win. As I walked toward my bedroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in years, the man looking back didn't seem tired. He looked awake. I whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow we stop buying love." And for the first time since the divorce, I slept soundly. Before drifting off, I said the same prayer my wife used to whisper whenever she needed strength. "Lord, teach me when to stand still and when to let go." The next morning, Houston woke up to spring rain. Thin streaks ran down my office windows, like lines drawn by steady hands, the kind of rain that slows traffic but sharpens a man's mind. I put on my gray suit, the one I used to wear when signing million-dollar contracts. My reflection in the mirror looked older, sure, but also freer. For 40 years, I'd built towers and bridges. Today, I was going to dismantle something, the bridge of dependence between me and my son. By 9:15, I was walking through the glass doors of Horizon Private Bank, where every manager still greeted me by name. "Good morning, Mr. Greer," said the young teller behind the counter. "It's been a while." "Yes," I said, placing my wallet on the desk. "I'm here to make some changes." She led me to a private office, soft jazz humming overhead. The screen in front of her glowed blue. "What can we help you with today?" "I'd like to remove a secondary beneficiary," I said. "Ryan Greer." Her eyebrows lifted. "Your son, correct?" I nodded. "That's right. He won't be needing my safety net anymore." She hesitated, professional but uneasy. "This will revoke all access immediately. Withdrawals, transfers, linked credit lines." "Are you sure you want to do that?" I smiled the way only an old man can, tired but certain. "Ma'am, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." As she typed, I watched the numbers and authorizations vanish one by one. Trust account deactivated. Investment link removed. Credit guarantee canceled. Each click sounded like a door closing somewhere in my past. 15 minutes later, she printed the confirmation forms. I signed them with the same pen I used to sign Ryan's first car loan years ago, the same flourish, only steadier now. "There," I said, sliding the paper back. "That's what freedom looks like." When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The pavement shimmered under thin sunlight, as if even the city was washing itself clean. My phone buzzed before I reached my truck. "Ryan," I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" His voice cracked a mix of fear and outrage. "I made some corrections," I said. "My card was declined at the gas station. I've got payments due." "You'll manage," I replied calmly. "You can't just cut me off like this." "I can," I said. "And I have." He went silent for a second, then tried another tactic. "This is about last night, isn't it? You're punishing me because I embarrassed you." I stared at the cloudy skyline through my windshield. No sun. "I'm teaching you what life does when you embarrass yourself." He cursed under his breath, the way he used to as a teenager when caught lying. "You think you're righteous, old man, but you'll regret this. Mom will never forgive you." "Your mother stopped forgiving me years ago," I said quietly. "And I stopped asking her to." He hung up. The screen went black, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful, like the end of a storm that had raged too long. I drove home slow, letting each mile peel another layer of guilt off my shoulders. By the time I reached my driveway, I felt lighter. Inside the house smelled of cedar and old memories. I poured coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and looked out toward the wet garden. Tiny drops clung to the roses Margaret had planted years ago. They glimmered like truth under sunlight, fragile but real. For years I'd tried to build Ryan's future like one of my construction projects. Draw the plans, pour the foundation, make sure nothing cracked. But children aren't houses. They're wild, unpredictable storms, and sometimes the best thing you can do is stop trying to control the weather. I finished my coffee and picked up the newspaper. Somewhere between the business section and the obituaries, a single thought hit me hard. My son will never learn responsibility if I keep paying his tuition for life. That realization didn't sting. It liberated me. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the horizon, the kind that reminds you storms don't end. They move on. And for the first time in decades, so did I. By noon the next day, the storm I'd started quietly at the bank had gone public. It began with a Facebook post. My father cut me off because I called my stepdad the real man in my life. Guess money's more important to him than family. There it was plain, manipulative, and perfectly designed to pull sympathy. Within minutes, it had hearts, angry reacts, and comments like, "That's so cruel, and you deserve better." Ryan, and right below it, my ex-wife Claudia commented, "Stay strong, son. Real fathers don't abandon their children." I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee, scrolling through it all. The words didn't hurt me this time. They just confirmed what I already knew: my son had inherited more from his mother than my last name. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. Because truth doesn't panic, it waits. I set the phone face down and opened my laptop. There was another storm waiting for me there, one I could control. On my email dashboard was a reminder: Greer Travel Concierge upcoming trip, Dubai honeymoon package for Ryan and Amanda. I'd prepaid the entire thing 6 months ago. 5-star hotel, ocean view suite, first-class flights, champagne on arrival. Nearly $12,000 in total. At the time, I told myself it was a gesture of love. Now I realized it had been a bribe for gratitude that never came. I clicked Manage Booking. The airline page loaded, showing bright photos of beaches and infinity pools. Cancel entire reservation, it asked. I hovered over the button. For 35 years, I'd built skyscrapers that touched clouds. But this simple click felt like the tallest thing I'd ever done. I pressed confirm. A line of text appeared. Refund amount $12,400. Funds will be returned within 5 business days. $12,000 returning home. 12,000 lessons that would finally be paid in full. Not 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Ryan. I let it ring once, twice before picking up. Dad, what the hell did you do? The airline says our honeymoon is canceled. That's correct. You can't do that. It was my trip. I paid for it, I said evenly. I can do whatever I want. He went quiet. The sound of his breath uneven. This is revenge, isn't it? You're pathetic. You'll die alone, old man. Maybe, I said softly, but I'll die debt-free. He cursed and hung up. Seconds later, my screen lit up again this time. Notifications from Facebook. Ryan Greer has posted again. He wrote, "Some fathers use money to control. Real men use love. Glad I have Vincent to show me the difference." And there it was. His digital war. The crowd cheered for him again, Claudia liking every comment, Vincent silent but smiling in a tagged photo of their new yacht. I almost laughed, because I'd seen men like Vincent before, men who used money as theater. All show no foundation. You can't build anything lasting on pride and payments. That night I went for a walk through my quiet neighborhood. The Texas air smelled like rain and dust. I watched porch lights flicker on one by one homes full of people who'd made their own peace long ago. And I promised myself that I'd rather be alone in truth than surrounded by people who only stayed for the paycheck. When I came home, I deleted my Facebook account for good. No more public explanations, no more debates. Let them talk. I was done explaining myself to people who'd already decided their version of me. I opened the Bible that had sat untouched on my nightstand for years. It fell open to 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God gave us not a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." I closed my eyes and smiled. For the first time since Margaret's funeral, I felt that power return, not the kind that controls, but the kind that releases. If you're still following this story, type 1 in the comments. Let me know you're still here walking through this with me. 3 days after I canceled the Dubai trip, the silence broke. It started with a voicemail, Ryan's voice trembling unsteady. Dad, I think something's wrong with the Tesla. The dealership says the financing's in my name, not Vincent's. I can't make the payments. I played it twice. Each word sounded like a brick falling off a tower he'd spent years pretending was solid. By evening, the text messages came one after another. They're taking the car. Vincent won't answer his phone. Mom says she'll talk to him, but he's in Palm Beach. The illusion was unraveling. See, when people build their pride on borrowed things, it doesn't take much wind for the whole house to collapse. And for Ryan, that wind had finally arrived. I sat in my recliner with a cup of coffee watching the Texas rain sweep across my yard. The sound of thunder rolled in slow and low, steady, almost sympathetic. After decades of holding my breath, I finally let it out. I didn't text him back. I didn't call. I just waited the way life waits for you to learn the hard way. By the next afternoon, there was a knock at my gate. When I opened it, Claudia was standing there, hair-soaked mascara running, wearing heels that didn't belong in a thunderstorm. Thomas, you have to fix this. Her voice cracked before she even finished the sentence. I leaned against the gatepost, arms folded. Fix what? Ryan's losing everything, the car's gone, the apartment's 3 months behind, and Vincent says it's not his responsibility. Her tone sharpened, desperate. He's your son, for God's sake. He's 36, Claudia. That's not the point, she snapped. You've always taken care of him. You can't just stop now. Her words hit like echoes from the past. The same tone she'd used every time she wanted a remodel, a vacation, a bailout. Only now there was no audience. I already did stop, I said quietly. Rain dripped from her diamond earrings, each drop catching the porch light like falling stars. Do you even hear yourself? She hissed. He's spiraling. He's not built for this kind of stress. Then maybe he'll finally start building himself, I said. She blinked, stunned. You're unbelievable. I came here for help, not philosophy. I stepped aside and pointed toward the living room. Come in then. Let's talk. Inside, she hovered near the entryway, scanning the place like a stranger. The house hadn't changed much since the divorced solid oak furniture family photos, the smell of cedar and coffee. Still living simple, I see, she muttered. Vincent says a man's surroundings reflect his ambition. I smiled. Then I guess mine reflect peace. She frowned, twisting the tissue in her hand. Please, Thomas, just loan him something. He's not like you. He's sensitive. That word again, sensitive. She used it when he quit college, when he got fired from his third job, when he maxed out his credit cards. It was her shield against accountability. I'll give him something, I said finally. Her eyes brightened, hopeful. Really, I reached for my wallet, pulled out a single $50 bill, and laid it on the coffee table between us. She blinked. $50. What is this supposed to be, bus fare? I said. For Ryan to get to his first job interview. Her mouth fell open. That's insulting. No, I said, standing up. That's responsibility. For a moment she just stared, torn between fury and disbelief. Then she snatched the bill, clutching it like it might transform into the miracle she'd come for. You'll regret this, she said, trembling. When he hits rock bottom, when he blames you for abandoning him, then maybe rock bottom's the best place to start rebuilding. She spun on her heel and stormed out into the rain, slamming the gate behind her. I watched from the window as her car's headlights disappeared down the street. The puddles reflected streaks of lightning, sharp, white, final. For the first time in years, my house felt quiet, not empty, just honest. Outside thunder rumbled again, not a warning this time, but a benediction. A week passed after Claudia's stormy visit, and the house fell back into its quiet rhythm. No phone calls, no guilt trips, no demands, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the clock in my study. Silence had become my favorite company. Then one morning, as the first light stretched across my kitchen, my phone buzzed. It was Grace, my daughter. "Dad," she said, her voice bubbling with something I hadn't heard from her in months, hope. "You're not going to believe this. Ryan got a job." I leaned back in my chair. "A job, yeah. Entry-level position at a real estate office downtown. It's nothing fancy, but it's steady work. He starts Monday." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. The words felt almost foreign. Ryan. Work. Monday. I'd waited 36 years to hear that combination. Grace continued. "He sold the Tesla, used the money to pay 3 months' rent on a small apartment. He said he's done with handouts." I looked out the window toward the rose bushes Margaret had planted before she passed. New buds were pushing through tiny flashes of red against the morning dew. "Sounds like spring's come early," I murmured. Grace laughed softly. "He's different, Dad. I think he finally understands." When we hung up, I sat there for a while, the smell of coffee filling the room. Maybe this is what growth sounds like, not fireworks, not applause, just quiet progress. I thought about the boy who used to hide behind excuses, the man who called another man dad, and now the son who was finally learning what it meant to stand upright. I went to my desk and pulled out an old photo album. Inside was a picture of Ryan at age 8 holding a hammer almost as big as his arm. He'd followed me around the job sites back then, pretending to be my apprentice. I remember him saying, "Dad, I want to build things like you do." Somewhere along the line, life and my overprotectiveness had built him walls instead. But those walls were finally cracking. That afternoon, I drove downtown to run some errands. On the way, I passed Greer Plaza, one of the buildings my company had built years ago. The glass facade gleamed under the Texas sun, strong and steady. I couldn't help but think every strong structure begins with pressure and patience. Maybe suns weren't any different. At a red light, I caught myself smiling. For the first time in years, it wasn't forced. When I got home, I brewed another pot of coffee and opened my Bible. It fell to Proverbs 19:18, a verse Margaret once underlined in her careful handwriting. "Discipline your children, for in that there is hope. Do not be a willing party to their death." I traced the ink with my thumb. Back then, I'd thought discipline meant lectures or rules. Now I understood it meant boundaries born from love. The hardest part of fatherhood isn't saying yes. It's saying no and meaning it. As evening settled, the phone buzzed again. Another message from Grace. A photo, this time Ryan in a button-down shirt standing in front of his new office. His tie was crooked, his smile unsure but real. Underneath her text read, "He wanted me to tell you thank you." For a moment, I just stared at that screen, my throat tightening. Not because of pride, not because of vindication, but because gratitude after all these years finally sounded like a language he'd learned to speak. I set the phone down and looked around the house, quiet, simple mine. No drama, no begging, just peace. Outside, the sun dipped low over the Houston skyline, turning the glass towers gold. In the reflection on my window, I didn't see an old man who'd lost his family. I saw a father who'd finally set them free. That night, before turning out the light, I whispered the same words Margaret once prayed. When our children were young, Lord, thank you for answering the prayers I didn't know how to ask. For letting him fall just far enough to find his way back. It was a Saturday morning in late April when I saw a familiar figure standing at my gate. From my porch, I could tell by the way his shoulders slumped that it was Ryan. He wasn't wearing the designer shirts or the expensive sneakers anymore. Just a wrinkled blue button-down and khaki pants that looked one wash away from giving up. He stood there for a long minute, shifting his weight like a boy about to confess to breaking a window. Then came the voice I hadn't heard in months, softer, uncertain. Dad, can we talk? I opened the gate and stepped aside. Come in, son. He hesitated at the threshold like the house might reject him. Then he walked in slowly, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His shoes squeaked on the tile floor. The silence between us was heavy, but not angry, just full of things that had waited too long to be said. Coffee, I asked. He nodded, eyes still down. I poured 2 cups and set them on the kitchen table. Steam rose between us like a fragile truce. I got your photo, I said. Grace sent it. He looked up, a shy smile flickering. Yeah, I wanted you to see. I know it's not much, but it's honest work. I nodded. That's more than most men can say. He took a long sip, probably to buy time before the apology he came to give. Finally, he put the mug down, clasped his hands together, and exhaled. Dad, I owe you something. Actually, I owe you a lot. I was cruel. I said things I didn't even believe. His voice cracked a little. At that birthday party, I thought if I made Vincent look like the hero, I'd finally get Mom's approval. But all I got was a man who disappeared the second money stopped flowing. I stayed quiet. Let him wrestle with the truth. He went on. When the Tesla got repossessed, when my card declined at the grocery store, I panicked. I kept waiting for someone to save me, Vincent, Mom, even you. He looked up, eyes glistening, but no one did. And that's when I realized maybe that was the best thing that ever happened to me. The words settled in the room like rain after a long drought. I studied his face, thinner now lines of fatigue carving honesty where arrogance used to live. For the first time in years, I saw my son, not the boy I kept rescuing. I was angry at you, he admitted. I told myself you were punishing me. But once I started working, earning every dollar myself, I finally understood. You weren't punishing me. You were freeing me. He rubbed his palms together. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, Dad. I just wanted to tell you that I get it now. And I'm sorry. The house went quiet again. Outside, a cardinal chirped from the oak tree by the driveway, the same one we planted when Ryan was 12. Back then, he'd named it The Climb. I smiled faintly. Do you remember that tree? He followed my gaze. Yeah, I didn't think it'd still be standing. It's stronger than it looks, I said. Storms did that to it. He nodded slowly, the meaning not lost on him. We sat there in the stillness of shared understanding. No grand reconciliation, no tears or hugs. Just 2 men finally speaking the same quiet language, responsibility. After a while, he glanced at his watch. I should go. My shift starts in an hour. I stood walking him to the door. When he reached the porch, he turned back. Hey, Dad. Yes, son, I still have that old watch you gave me. I got it cleaned. It's running perfectly now. I smiled. So are you. He laughed softly, that familiar boyish sound I hadn't heard in years. "See you soon, Dad." As he walked down the path toward the street, I felt something uncoil in my chest, the kind of peace you don't get from being right, only from being patient. The sun caught the gold edge of that repaired watch on his wrist. It gleamed once before he turned the corner. And I thought to myself, that's what grace looks like when it finally comes home. Ryan came back the next Sunday. No announcement. No phone call first. Just a gentle knock on my front door around 8 a.m. The smell of morning rain still hanging in the air. When I opened the door, he held up 2 paper cups from the diner down the road. "Coffee for you," he said. "The strong kind. I figured you'd like that." It was a small gesture, but for a man who once measured love in luxury cars, it felt like a miracle. We sat on the porch swing, the same one I built decades ago for Margaret. The wood creaked softly under our weight, the rhythm slow and forgiving. The neighborhood was quiet sunlight stretching across wet pavement, and somewhere a lawnmower started its hum. Life was moving on, patient, ordinary, beautiful. "I didn't sleep much last night," Ryan said, handing me the coffee. "I kept thinking about everything I did, how blind I was." He took a long breath. "Mom's furious, you know. She says Vincent's under investigation. His company's collapsing. Turns out he's been taking out loans under her name." I didn't react. I just sipped my coffee and let him talk. She begged him to fix it. Ryan continued shaking his head. He told her it wasn't his problem. That's when she realized he'd used her just like she used you. He gave a humorless laugh. "Guess we all learn the hard way." For a while, neither of us spoke. We just listened to the birds and the wind through the oak branches. Then Ryan said something that caught me completely off guard. "Dad, I sold the last of my watches last week." I raised an eyebrow. "The collection you bragged about since college." He nodded. "Yeah. I used the money to clear the rest of my debt. Feels good, actually. I thought losing things would make me smaller. Turns out it makes room for peace." He leaned back, his face turned toward the sunlight. "It's weird. The first paycheck I earned, it wasn't much. But when I paid my rent with it, I felt taller." I smiled quietly. "That's the kind of wealth no one can repossess." Ryan chuckled. "You always talk like that, you know. Like a preacher with a construction license." I laughed a sound that surprised even me. Maybe that's not such a bad combination. He looked down at his coffee, then back at me. "You were right, Dad. Money without effort rots the soul. I didn't get it until I lost everything. I used to think you were cold withholding, but now I see it. You were trying to give me something bigger than comfort discipline." I reached over and put a hand on his shoulder. "No, son. I was trying to give you dignity. The rest you had to build yourself." He nodded, eyes glassy but steady. "I think I finally did." For a long while we didn't need words. The porch swing creaked, the sunlight shifted, and a soft breeze rolled through the garden. The roses Margaret planted years ago were blooming again, bright, defiant red against all that weathered wood. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black SUV slow in front of the house. Claudia's car. She didn't stop, just stared from behind her sunglasses, a ghost of the life we'd all outgrown. Ryan noticed too. He didn't flinch, didn't wave, just watched her pass by. When the SUV disappeared down the road, he sighed. "She keeps saying everything will go back to normal." I shook my head. "Normal's what broke us. Don't go back there." He smiled faintly. "I won't. The quiet returned, comfortable this time, not heavy. Ryan finished his coffee and set the cup on the porch railing. You know, I used to hate mornings like this. I thought peace was boring. And now I asked. Now I think it's the richest thing I've ever owned. I nodded. That's how you know you're finally growing up. The wind stirred again, scattering rose petals across the porch. They landed between us, little reminders that beauty doesn't need to last forever to matter. Ryan stood stretching. I've got to head to work. Promotion reviews next week. Wish me luck. You don't need luck, I said. You've got purpose. He smiled, the kind that reaches the eyes. See you Sunday, Dad. As he walked down the driveway, I watched the morning light catch on his repaired wristwatch, the same one I'd given him years ago. Its ticking matched the rhythm of the swing behind me, steady, sure. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about his future. He finally owned it. It's funny how quiet freedom sounds. Not like fireworks or applause, just the rustle of the wind through open windows and the hum of a man making coffee for no one but himself. 6 months had passed since that morning on the porch with Ryan. 6 months since Claudia's last text, since the drama faded like a bad radio signal, since I'd stopped waiting for someone to need me. And in that silence, something new had begun to grow. Most mornings I woke before sunrise. I'd sit by the kitchen window watching the sky turn from slate gray to gold over the Houston skyline. The roses in my garden were in full bloom, now proof that neglect can sometimes be the best fertilizer if it's replaced with truth. I'd sold my company the year before, but for the first time I wasn't chasing another project. My calendar was empty and my heart was finally full. Grace called every week, checking in from Austin. Ryan texted once in a while, short, simple messages. Got the promotion. Made my last payment. Took Mom out to lunch. It went okay. Each message was a line of quiet healing. Then one morning, as I flipped through the newspaper, a photo caught my eye. Vincent Hale, my ex-wife's golden husband, in handcuffs. The headline read, "Developer arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud case." I set the paper aside, not out of gloating, but relief. For years, I'd been the fool who paid for peace while other men sold illusions of it. Now truth had balanced the books. That evening, I sat in my study, the same desk where I'd once written checks I couldn't emotionally afford. On top of it lay a glossy brochure I'd picked up weeks ago, Alaskan Discovery Cruise, Northern Lights Expedition. For decades, I'd booked trips for everyone else, family vacations, honeymoons, retreats. This time, the ticket was in my name alone. I smiled and clicked Confirm Booking. Departure June 3rd. First-class cabin. Destination Anchorage to Juneau. Purpose, freedom. When I told Grace, she squealed. "Dad, that's amazing. You deserve it." Ryan, on the other hand, just laughed. "I can't believe it. The old man's finally taking a real vacation. You make it sound like a crime," I teased. "No." He said, his voice softer now, like justice. The weeks leading up to the trip passed in a calm blur. A haircut, a suitcase, new hiking boots, and an unfamiliar excitement humming beneath my ribs. On the morning of departure, the air was crisp, the kind that makes even old lungs feel new. I locked the front door, slid the key into my pocket, and whispered, "See you soon home." At the airport, people rushed past with luggage and headphones lost in their own worlds. I found my gate, sat by the window, and watched the sunrise spill over the wings of my plane. For once, I wasn't thinking about who might call me, who might need saving, or what unfinished business waited back in Houston. For once, there was no guilt hiding in my carry-on. The flight north was smooth, the clouds endless. By the time we landed in Anchorage, the air smelled like pine and possibility. 2 days later, the cruise ship pulled away from port. The sea stretched out like glass, and the snow-capped mountains rose in silent majesty. I stood on the deck, the cold air biting at my cheeks, and realized I wasn't lonely. I was whole. That night, the northern lights danced across the sky, green, blue, and violet waves twisting like ribbons. I thought of Margaret, of all the storms we'd weathered. I thought of Ryan as a boy building tree houses and dreaming too small for his heart. And I thought of the man he was now, humble, steady, working with his own 2 hands. I pulled out my phone and saw a new message from him. Dad, I just wanted to say thank you for teaching me what a real father does. Love you. My eyes blurred not from age but from gratitude. I typed back, proud of you, son. Always. I put the phone away and looked up at the shimmering lights above the ship. They reminded me of every lesson life had taught me too late, that love isn't measured by what we give, but by what we stop giving when it's time to let someone grow. The sea wind stung my face, and I smiled through it. For the first time in 73 years, I wasn't building for anyone else. I was building me. When I came back from Alaska, the air in Houston felt softer somehow, like the whole city had exhaled while I was gone. The cab pulled into my driveway at sunset. The roses along the fence were in bloom, and the light hit the house just right, warm, forgiving. It didn't look like a monument to a past life anymore. It looked like home. As I stepped out, I noticed a car parked across the street. Not a Tesla this time, just a modest gray sedan. The driver's door opened and Ryan stepped out. He waved. "Welcome home, Dad." For a moment, I just stood there taking in the sight of him. His hair was shorter, his posture straighter. He looked settled, like a man who'd found a place to stand without leaning on anyone else. "I thought you'd be working today," I said, smiling. "I took the afternoon off," he replied. "Had something I wanted to give you." He reached into his pocket and handed me a small envelope. My name was written on it in careful block letters. Inside was a check, not for a fortune, but for something far more valuable. $1,000 memo line. For everything I didn't say thank you for. I stared at it for a long time. "Ryan, you don't owe me this." I know, he said, his voice steady, but I needed to do it anyway. "It's not repayment, it's respect." I folded the check carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. "Then I'll keep it," I said. "Not for the money, but for the meaning." We walked to the porch together. He glanced at the old swing and smiled. "Still holding up like the man who built it?" I said. He laughed softly, then grew quiet. I wanted to tell you something." He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I've been seeing someone. Her name's Lena. She's different kind, grounded. She doesn't care about fancy things. We met at work. She makes me want to be better." I nodded slowly. "Sounds like she already is." "She wants to meet you," he said. "But I told her we're taking it slow. I wanted to make sure I earned your trust back first." He didn't need to say more. The fact that he'd thought about earning instead of expecting told me everything. We sat down on the porch swing, the wood still smooth from years of weather and memory. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky gold and pink. Ryan stared out toward the street. "You know, when you stopped helping me, I thought you were being cruel. But on the nights I couldn't sleep, I realized you were giving me a gift. You were giving me back myself. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Every man's got to fall once, son. Otherwise, he'll never know what standing feels like. He nodded. I just hope someday I can raise my kid the way you raised me, mistakes and all. I smiled at that. Just make sure you raise them with love that has limits. The limits teach the love how to last. He leaned back, exhaling. You always sound like you're quoting a sermon. Maybe I am, I said, grinning. Or maybe that's just what happens when you survive long enough to make peace with your own story. We sat there until dusk deepened into night. Fireflies flickered over the yard like sparks from an invisible campfire. When Ryan finally stood, he reached for my hand. Thank you, Dad, he said simply. And that was it. No long speech, no ceremony, just the truth, raw and uncluttered. After he drove away, I went inside and set the envelope with the check on my desk. Next to it, I placed a framed photo from Alaska me standing on the ship deck, smiling under the northern lights. 2 different versions of me side by side, one who lived to please, and one who finally lived in peace. That night I sat by the window, the city lights glowing like constellations scattered across the earth. Somewhere out there, my son was driving home from work, probably humming along to a song on the radio, his heart lighter than it had been in years. And mine was too. I thought about Margaret, the woman who taught me that love wasn't about constant giving. It was about knowing when to stop. I whispered to the quiet room. You were right, honey. He finally learned. The clock ticked gently in the background. The roses outside swayed in the night breeze. I closed my eyes and said the same prayer that had carried me through every storm. Lord, thank you for the lessons hidden in loss, for the peace that follows pain, and for the grace to forgive without forgetting. When I opened my eyes, the world outside looked different, not because it had changed, but because I had. I wasn't a man defined by what he'd lost anymore. I was a father defined by what he'd finally let go. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Brian's Stories, share this video with someone who needs hope, and tell us in the comments what part spoke to you most.